Let's go out on video chat now. I'm very interested to hear this guy's opinion. John Hodge from 3DownNation.com. How you doing, John? Good to see you.
I'm doing great, Rod. Hope you're doing well as well.
Yeah, we are. We are. Very much enjoying your coverage. You've been working very hard at 3DownNation.com, as always, doing a lot of media appearances, and this is just the latest. Isn't it interesting covering the CFL right now, right? Things seem to be changing. It's slowed down a little bit. It's not by the hour anymore, but it's certainly by the day. What's your read on things as we sit here on Monday, July 27th?
One of the pieces of feedback I've been getting a little bit on social media from frustrated CFL fans is they're saying, a lot of this coverage really isn't that clear. And my response to them has been, yeah, you're right. The coverage hasn't been clear because the situation is clear as mud right now. As you mentioned, Rob, the situation was changing hourly for a long time. It's still moving at a rapid pace. The good news seems to be followed by bad news quickly, pretty much anytime something optimistic is reported. There are still huge hurdles for the CFL to overcome. The CBA negotiations are one of them. I know you were talking about it just before I came on. Farhan Lalji with a positive report today. Solomon Elimimian clapped back, said, no, it's not going well. It's not going well at all. The players have felt pretty taken advantage of through this whole situation, which I think is perfectly fair and legitimate. The CFL really made no attempt for 3.5 months for them to get paid. Meanwhile, the coaches and the scouts and everybody in the front offices were taken care of. And they, of course, set a completely arbitrary deadline for a CBA, and then kind of sort of pushed it back by a day to the 24th. And then when Friday things didn't get done, they said, we'll give ourselves another week. So the situation is rapidly changing. It's messy. I don't fully blame the league or the players simply because we are, of course, in unprecedented times. But it's certainly one of the weirdest times I've had covering the CFL. And I feel for fans, and ultimately I am one of the league. I love the league. It feels weird having a summer without games. Hopefully these things come to a head soon and we start to get some real answers after a whole bunch of confusion and some pretty bizarre developments over the past 3-4 months. Actually,
I'm interested on that point, but Tom Halleck, T-Bone, writes in. He says, John sits beside me at Bomber home games. Poor guy. So shout out to T-Bone watching today from Winnipeg. We're very big in Winnipeg, as you know, Dupes.
Yep.
I want to get your take on Winnipeg as a hub city in a moment, but first, you said you were after some answers, or you're hoping to get some answers. What are the questions? What are your top questions you'd like to have answered as we sit here right now?
To me, the biggest question remains, what happens if the CFL season goes ahead and we have a Miami Marlins situation where suddenly there's an outbreak on a team? The CFL hasn't answered those questions yet. And I think it's because they realize there's no way to continue with the season if there is an outbreak on a team of COVID-19. That's my speculation. But at the end of the day, I know the league did have some type of clarity come out. Dr. Rosen in Manitoba said that, if a player tests positive or if a player breaks the bubble, for instance, if the bubble is set up, and then a player is caught breaking curfew, so to speak, leaving the bubble, then they will be sent home. I have a lot of questions about that. In particular, let's say the night before a playoff game, your quarterback or your left tackle or your star pass rusher breaks curfew and get caught. Are they really getting sent home? Because I have some doubts about that. CFL teams find ways all the time to bend and massage rules into place so the guys can see the field. I don't really think that this pandemic would be much different. That's just my suspicion, of course. But to me, that's the big one. What happens if there's an outbreak, and will the rule actually be enforced if a guy breaks the bubble, if a player decides that he's tired of spending time at the hotel playing Fortnite with his teammates, if he wants to go out and see the city a little bit, enjoy some nightlife, as players are wont to do sometimes? Will they actually be sent home? What will the actual consequence be? Because, of course, the consequences should be taken seriously, but, teams also like winning football games. So it's a tricky thing to navigate, I think, for some clubs moving forward.
And I would suggest, John, you don't have an answer because there is no answer. They don't have an answer for that right now, would be my guess. The one thing, again, I'll get back to that Winnipeg as a hub city comment in a moment, but, there are those that say, 3Down better not trash the CFL because without the CFL, they don't have a website. Have you guys sat, yourself and JD and the crew, and just said, what are we going to do if there's no season? I'm not asking you to divulge your plans. I know you well enough that you love all of Canadian football, university, junior, and so forth, too. But are you concerned about that, getting through a 2020 if there's no CFL football to write about?
Well, actually, I'll use this as an opportunity to announce that we're officially transitioning to 4Down. No, I'm just kidding. We're not.
You had me. You had me.
No, 4Down Nation is not going to happen. We'll find ways to make content. We've managed over the last 4 months. Unfortunately, it's looking like there won't be a U Sports season whatsoever. The RSEQ may or may not go ahead. That remains unclear. But the Atlantic Conference, the OUA, and of course, Canada West have already packed it in for 2020. But the NCAA season could happen. There are some big name prospects down south. Alaric Jackson being probably the best, the left tackle out of Iowa. His counterpart on the offensive line, his fellow bookend at right tackle, was the 13th overall pick in this year's NFL draft. So there's lots of Canadians to watch in the NCAA. There's also lots of Canadians who were involved in this year's draft, 5 of them who found homes in the NFL, 2 of whom got picked, of course, in Chase Claypool and Neville Gallimore, who each just recently inked contracts with their NFL teams, respectively. But there's also guys like Michael Hoyt and Marc-Antoine Dequoy, who are going to be fighting for spots on NFL rosters as undrafted free agents. Carter O'Donnell, another one, Ryson John. So we'll find ways to make content. I'm not too worried.
I'm not worried either, but I'm glad that you had the opportunity to explain that. Our viewers want to know, what is the book behind you with Bo Levi on the cover, John? Is that indeed a book?
It is. It is the official updated 2019 CFL Facts and Rules book. And my boy Tom Halleck, don't listen to anybody, by the way, who says that Wade Miller runs things in Winnipeg. Tom Halleck, my boy, is actually the person in charge. He runs the show in Winnipeg. From the press box, we sit together on game days. That was a little tip from him. He made sure I got one last season covering games at IGF. And so it becomes part of the display.
I love it. And so Peter Giannakis also runs Winnipeg, the owner of the Pony Corral. But you know that. The Pony Corrals.
Of course.
Yes, plural. So speaking of, how did it go over in Winnipeg when they were named the hub city? Because there were a vocal few in Regina that were saying, we don't want that in our city. We don't want the potential of a breakout here. How did it go over when it was named as Winnipeg?
I think there was a lot of excitement from football fans, but there was also concern, some of which came from the football community, some of which came from outside the football community. I think it's understandable. I think it's fair for people to be concerned. To me, the number one concern was when the plan was initially announced, there was no mention of testing before players were to travel to Winnipeg. That was changed the next day. Wade Miller came out, gave a statement and said, no, players will now be tested before getting on an airplane to Winnipeg. And that was reiterated by Dr. Russo the next day. And so I think that's a big positive step. I think the thought of, anywhere from 700 to 800 athletes flying into Winnipeg, having not been tested for COVID, especially when so many of them are coming from coronavirus hotbeds in places like Texas and California, Florida, for a lot of southern states, that's something that could put Manitobans at risk. And the numbers in Manitoba have increased quite dramatically over the last week and a half. But that's because for the first 13 days of July, there were no new cases in the province of Manitoba. Manitoba was down to 1 active case. The cases are now, I believe, in the mid-50 range, approximately 56 cases active in the province. Still very low compared to most Canadian provinces, and exceptionally low when compared to a lot of places in the United States. But still, people are concerned, and I think that's more than fair. They don't want people with COVID-19, flying into Winnipeg, using the amenities at the airport, getting on a bus, and then finding all of a sudden, oh my goodness, you are in fact contagious. We've had, X number of people who are infected with COVID-19, whether they're actively showing symptoms or not, active in the community. A lot of the transmissions in Manitoba, from what I understand, have been related to travel of some kind, often air travel. So people are concerned. I think it's fair. But I also give the CFL some credit for kind of closing that hole in the plan. I think testing athletes before they arrive in Winnipeg, it's going to be hard to enforce. But I think it's certainly a key step. And I think that's helped reassure a lot of people in Manitoba that this plan isn't reckless. It's still it's not without risk. Of course, nothing that we do these days is. We're all at risk of some level at all times. But I think it helps put people at ease at least a little bit more.
Good stuff. Well, John, I would say we covered a lot of ground today, and I learned a lot. I appreciate the time. I'm reading every day. Keep it up, my man. And thanks. Stay safe out there in Winnipeg.
Appreciate it, Rod. All the best.
John Hodge from 3DownNation.com, their Winnipeg bureau chief, joining us today.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.